Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we celebrate filmmaking, storytelling and cinema across the island of Ireland. So if this is your first time listening in, make sure you subscribe so you can listen back to our extensive back catalogue, where we chat with creative voices from across the screen industries. And in today's podcast, we're delighted to welcome back our longtime contributor Naemi Victoria, who's a talented writer and academic herself, and she'll be in conversation with Irish director Kathryn Ferguson about her BAFTA-nominated short Nostalgie. Kathryn is the Emmy-nominated director behind Nothing Compares, and her latest short drama stars Aidan Gillen as a washed-up 80s one-hit wonder turned IT entrepreneur, and he is stunned when a Belfast battalion invites him to perform at their centenary celebrations.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, a massive congratulations on the BAFTA nomination for Nostalgie. It is a really, really fantastic short film, and before I go on about it for ages, I just wanted to hand over to you and was wondering if you could maybe tell us a bit about the short and what it is about.
So what if Nostalgie is about an English washed up pop star from 1986 who had a one-hit wonder. He had a number one hit in 1986, and his career, sadly, after this one-hit wonder, evaporated in a puff of smoke, and he found himself having a much more conventional life than he'd hoped. And when we meet him today, say 2024, he runs a successful IT business in England. He, out of the blue, gets an email from a man in Belfast saying that one of his songs is their anthem, and they love his music dearly, and they would love for him to come over and play at a centenary event in Belfast. He initially says no thank you, but this guy in Belfast is very persistent, and out of intrigue and I suppose a quest to try and go back to his own most potent self, he agrees to go. So Nostalgie is very much about his journey over from England, and we're with him during his nostalgia trip. He's excited to be arriving into Belfast. He even meets a young woman on the boat over, a fellow musician who's played by Jessica Reynolds, and says the fateful lines, "Oh, I hear Belfast is a bit like Berlin these days. It's pretty cool, isn't it?" To which she replies, "Is it?" That kind of sets the tone for the whole film, and I guess the English apathy towards our colonial histories and the North. And so it's very much about this journey over, and really it's about what happens when he arrives. It isn't the cool Berlin moment that he's hoping for. It's quite the opposite. And I guess really, without giving the whole thing away, it's about him meeting these men and everything going terribly wrong for him on this trip, and him having to have this, it's like an existential crisis. It's a film about moral relativism. It's about, as I said, colonial histories. It's very much looking at what happens to someone's art, in this case music, when it goes out in the world and it loses, the artist loses autonomy of whose hands it lands in. So it's about lots of things.
There's so much in there, and you already brought up the scene on the boat, and I find that it was so perfect. It was, because you learn everything about the character in that scene. It sets everything up so well, and you're just there, and I think it's so compelling because he's so flawed, but you're there with his flawedness. Yeah, it's so fascinating. And then you already brought up Berlin. Is that where the title comes from as well? From the German nostalgie?
It's actually French. So it's the title is based on the name of the song, his B-side, which is Nostalgie de la Boue, which is translates to something like a love of the depraved.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the title of the song that was, of course, featured in Wendy Erskine's amazing story, of which our film is very much closely based on. And it was this Nostalgie de la Boue that gives the film its title.
What was it then like working the short story into a film, into the script and then into the film? There's so many different stages of the process, and there, right?
There really are. What was most significant was bringing the incredible writer and director Stacey Gregg and fellow Belfastian on board to adapt Wendy's story into a script for this film. And that was a very joyous process, actually. I'd met Stacey off the back of Nothing Compares, my feature doc about Sinead O'Connor. And we met at a film event in London maybe 6 months before this all happened, and got on like a house on fire. So I could think of nobody I'd rather work with on this as a fellow Belfastian who really understood the politics, of Wendy's story and then what we wanted to do with the film itself. So the process was very much, well, I mean, so basically, even to go back a step further, just about how the whole thing came together was that I was approached on the back end of Nothing Compares surprisingly, by various drama producers, which I did find slightly baffling given that it was a feature documentary.
Yeah.
But I had various drama producers get in touch, and it was one drama producer, Kath Mattock, who's a London-based producer. Basically, she said, have you read the work of Wendy Erskine? And I had read her first book of short stories, Sweet Home, but I hadn't read the new one that was just about to come out, which was called Dance Move. So Kath sent me the manuscript, and I read all 12 short stories within that book to really get a sense of what might work as a film. And it was Nostalgie that immediately jumped out at me. Then it was reaching out to Stacey Gregg to see if they were interested. And they were. And that process then took maybe, I don't know, like 4 months, 5 months of back and forth. Stacey would send me the script, we'd talk about it. There were little amendments, really. They nailed it completely and delighted with it. And then I suppose what we both did then was meet up with Wendy and talk through the various drafts that we were working through. And okay, I just remember sitting with Wendy and Stacey in a Chinese takeaway in Belfast, cold winter's night, must have been in 2023, going through these early drafts. It was just incredible because we just all absolutely on the same page and left very aligned. And I guess once that happened, then it was like, right, now, how do we get this thing funded? And then that took another couple of years. That was a good couple of years of trying to work out how to get it funded. It's very hard to get shorts funded. It's very hard to get any films funded. But shorts, and it was the first time I worked with drama before. So it was a different process than anything I'd known. So that took quite a while. But then, the project kind of lulled along for about a year and a half, where we were talking to various funders and partners, and nothing was really happening, or things happened and then they fell through. So it was like, will this thing ever actually come to life? And then quite suddenly, I'd say in October 2024, we suddenly had a very positively near green light from a brilliant collaborator who was Globe, who are part of Universal Music in London, and they support music-based film. Miraculously, they were like, yeah, we love this. Let's see what we can do. And once we had that vote of confidence, we kind of just ran with it, and we're like, right, let's see if we can get this up off the ground. So we had our script, we had a bit of funding, and then it was when and how do we do this? And what really determined what happened next was Robbie Ryan. Brilliant Robbie Ryan, who I was, of course, a huge fan of. And I'd met Robbie through another Nothing Compares. Well, it was a Film 4 event, but I was there with Nothing Compares. Got chatting to him a year or so before and could think of no one better. And we quite cheekily just reached out to his agent saying, look, we're doing this thing. What do you think? Would he be up for a short? And Robbie's amazing in that he does shoot a lot of shorts. And his brilliant agent came back saying he loves the idea, he loves the script, he's up for it, but he's only got 4 days free this entire year. And it's in 4 weeks. Can you do it? So we went from this very languid time to just being like, holy God, off we go.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can make happen here. And actually, it was that frenetic, wild energy that definitely, I think, just gave birth to the whole thing. Because as soon as we had Robbie, we had our script, we had some money, then we were able to go out to our incredible cast. And we worked with Shaheen Baig, incredible London-based casting director who brought in to the table, which was extraordinary and a dream come true. And then we worked with a brilliant Belfast-based casting director, Mary Ellen O'Hara, who cast our incredible Northern Irish cast. That all happened within those couple of weeks. But then we had all of this happening and production was happening. But then the key thing that needed to happen was the songs. Conjure up two 1986 hits from scratch. All we had was a name, was a title, Nostalgie de la Boo. So then what was phenomenal was what Universal did, or sorry, not Universal, Globe, because they have this incredible roster of musicians as part of their roster at Globe. We were introduced to Dan Smith, the front singer, the frontman from Bastille, and who was
People might know him.
People might know him. Yep. No, he's a wonder. But he is and was working toward, he was very interested in working more in film composition. So he then came on board and we had this amazing challenge of how do you write this music, and particularly with a young musician, how do we go back to that era and make it authentic and make the production authentic and make it enough of an anthem and an earworm that it's believable as a song that people would be listening to, over the previous 30 years. And one key thing to mention that I haven't so far, when we're talking about artists losing control of their work, Sinead obviously had experienced that with Trump using Nothing Compares to You at his rallies. We had Bruce Springsteen and Reagan with Born in the USA, and then much more close to home, and certainly what's part of, a big inspiration for Wendy's original story was our own paramilitary groups in the North using Simply the Best by Tina Turner as their theme tune. So this was the original inspiration. Tina Turner had sent multiple cease and desists to get them to stop. And you can't. Once it's out. You're letting your babies out into the ether and you can't stop whose hands it goes into. So there was all of this to consider when writing the songs themselves. And but basically over those 4 weeks, Dan would write multiple versions of Nostalgie de la Boo. They'd come back and we'd go back with our feedback, and it was a lot of back and forth because it just had to be right, and then it had to be singable by Aidan Gillen, who is a really good singer. He very much says he's not a singer. Of course, I mean he's an incredible actor. That he's not here to sing, but he can, he's a good singer. But it's still, to create this 80s anthemic banger takes a lot of gusto. That was then another part of it. And quite interestingly, we ended up working, well, Aidan actually went to work with John Reynolds, Sinead's producer in Dublin, to record the songs with him and to have John's incredible production expertise trying to help bring this whole thing together, because we needed 2 recordings, because the plan was always with the shoot that we would have 2 ready to go 1986 pop hits recorded, and then we would have Aidan singing live.
You already touched on that with because I went back and watched Nothing Compares after I watched this short, and wow, that was your feature debut. That's mind-blowing, Kathryn. That is crazy. But it's absolutely it's such a fantastic documentary.
Thank you.
Really.
Thank you. It was made with a lot of love.
And it shows.
Yeah.
It definitely shows. It's in there.
Yeah.
And it comes across to the audience. Because I wanted to ask you what drew you from a documentary to a fictional short.
Yeah.
But you already touched on that there, right?
Yeah, and I guess, of course, I guess it was always somewhere, for me, because I'm not film school trained, so the way I've come at film has always been through the side door, and each time that I make anything, and I'm very much self-taught, so I haven't had this grand plan of where it's all leading, or I just try to follow my intuition as much as I can and follow the stories that I feel need to be shared. This was interesting to me, I guess, because I find it fascinating. The story of Nostalgie. It was a story about my hometown. It was a story about a musical artist. So for me, it felt like a direct link. Also within my own family, sadly, my mother's cousin was killed in this way in a bar shooting in 1972 in Belfast. He was a barman working in his daddy's pub, and he got shot and killed. So it was something, and I didn't know him. It's my mother's trauma, not mine, but it was certainly the spectre of that has been in my life, I guess, my whole life, knowing that, there's so many people in the North have had, they've lost somebody or something awful's happened. And I guess for me, whilst this film is about all these other things, it's also just what's left behind and the fractures of what's left behind. So I guess emotionally it did resonate without me even consciously, or even when I first read it, it just took me a minute. I think it was when I was shooting it, I was like, oh, and I was talking to my mom about it. It was like, for me, it had all been very much about what had happened with the music and, this the colonial histories, but actually the fact that it was in our own family, of course, did emotionally resonate deeply. So I guess, what you asked about drama, the stories that I want to tell next, one is very much a drama feature about Ireland, of course, and the other is a feature documentary. And I guess what I'm just trying to do is just really, really hone into instinct of what needs to be told. I just think it doesn't really matter which way or which format it comes out in. I guess what I'm trying to say
Yeah.
is like it's the story.
It's the lived experience, right?
Lived experience.
Like it's the way it also resonates
Yeah.
with like you as a creator then, and
Yes.
also the way it then kind of translates to the audience. Because it might be a fiction piece, but it's still something that relates to people's memories, to people's histories.
Exactly. Exactly. And I imagine everything that I do from here on in will be linked back to that. So it's that really. But they're both, and just the privilege of getting to make films in either which way is such a phenomenal thing to get to do and to tell these stories. So I'm very grateful for that. And Nostalgie was such an interesting first toe dip for me in drama. I felt extremely held, actually. I was very nervous because I hadn't worked with actors before. It is very different. But I was so lucky with who we had. We just had an extraordinary cast,
So the first time I watched it was just for the story, because like it was so tense I couldn't focus on anything else. And then the second time around it was the performances.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're so close to the character.
Yeah.
And then also like once he gets there and in the room, and the way you capture the room, it's just so well done. It makes it almost like, it makes it so tangible.
Yeah.
And also like the restraint in Aidan Gillen's performance is just,
Yeah.
wow.
Extraordinary to witness that, actually, and to then see how it translated on camera in the edits, and then how much to keep in and keep or to remove, but really it was extraordinary. And he was so generous with his time. I mean, he came up like 4 days before the shoots and just really like embedded himself in Belfast and in the story. And obviously he'd been up a fair bit with Game of Thrones and over the years and everything, but it was just, he really gave his time to it. And singing and the performances and having to go and record songs with John Reynolds and put himself out there in that way was hugely admirable, that he was willing to do that for a short as well,
Yeah, it was the performance, and then this also like this really personal experience of nostalgia.
Yeah.
That is part of it.
Yeah.
But then what I found really, really fascinating as well was that the look of the film is so nostalgic as well. And I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a bit more about the look and how the image, like this like texture of the image came about.
Well, first things first, as Robbie always does and insists on doing, was shot in film, which it just is such a deep pleasure to get to do. You know, it was, I felt that that's like a mandatory requirement of working with, you know, Robbie, you know, absolutely, you know, and no producer can disagree with that when it's Robbie Ryan. So I was like, brilliant, we have to shoot in film. What a shame. You know? And so I guess that's already, and you know, I think that's a perfect format or tool for this story and the themes that were and the graininess, you know, the themes that are in the film itself. So the way that it was shot by Robbie, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's extraordinary, really. Then I guess what we were trying to do was bridge the old and the new, given the themes. You know, we have Drew coming across on a very contemporary ferry, you know, meeting a young Jessica Reynolds on the boat. You know, all of that, I guess, is very much set in the now. But still does reek of nostalgia. I guess even Jessica's character for him could have been one of his friends or girlfriends back in
That
1986.
was such a phenomenal scene.
Isn't it?
Also, like, yeah, like the conclusion of it was, you know everything about that man now. Like that's like, say no more. We know everything about this character.
Well, he's just desperately trying to connect, isn't he? He's really trying to
Yeah.
connect, and she's just like, don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. I've got time for this. Thank you very much. But and you really feel for him because he's mortified. But there's all of that, and then I guess, you know, then it was really art direction and locations and where and how this was going to work. I mean, Belfast is that, you know, the architecture of Belfast and the landscape of Belfast is such a combination of the old and the new, which lends itself perfectly for this story. When you do come off the ferry, you're going in through the docks, and it is much more a bit of a metropolis, with, you know, all of the city buildings and food markets, and you know, you do get a sense of maybe a whiff rather than a sense of Belfast being slightly like Berlin potentially, if you squint. But then you're going, you know, as soon as you kind of go out into the peripheries, then you're going out into the older Belfast. And I suppose the Belfast that's been very marred by the troubles and what's going on. And you start to see the remnants of that in our murals and our flags and the tattered flags and all of that. It's all very, very much there today. So that was all there for us. You know, ready for the camera, no art direction needed. And then I guess we were trying to find like a mid-Ulster style hotel, which was actually very hard to find. Disappointingly, so many of our old hotels have now been revamped. But yes, we found the one way out in the sticks, that worked really well. And then I guess it's just about the isolation. Drew thinks he's going to this metropolis to have a fun night out in cool Belfast, and quite quickly realizes he's out very isolated in the countryside of Mid Ulster. And I think that's where everything starts to really dawn on him. Well, he hasn't even clocked on that he's vulnerable at that point. I think he's just disappointed that he's not going to get to chat to cool young things and enjoy his night away from home, you know, as an aging rock star.
Be a pop star again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But he's still like, and I love even that scene where he's peacocking and he's getting himself G'd up, even though that he's, you know, he's realized where he is and it's not ideal, but he's still determined to have a good time. And he's going to make this a good night no matter what. Getting his mascara on and listening to his old music. You know, he's really trying. And then I guess it was the location of the main scene of our performance, which is actually the very famous Dockers Club in Belfast, which very sadly closed. We just read the news this week. It's just shut down. It's this phenomenal bar that's been there for decades. And really, it's that's how it was, you know. We brought in a few key props and a bit of art, you know, a bit of art department and dressing, but it was just this extraordinary room, extraordinary lighting. You know, it had the stage, like we brought in some silver tinsel to help.
I love, like, beautiful. Yeah, that scene, like especially with the graininess of the, like, it's
Yes.
so it is so nostalgic.
It's so nostalgic. It's so nostalgic. Yeah, so really a lot of it was there. And then, you know, a huge, I suppose, of the art direction, you know, and I guess there's the flashback scenes to what he, you know, to the atrocity that he's read about. And it was just trying to do the edges of things. It was really carefully trying to, you know, just show like the fragments of memory. And I guess also even with like the young Drew that appears, he arrives in and like flashes in for a few seconds, you know, at the end of the first song. And it's just the fragments of memory that we were trying to show, both with the kind of dreamlike sequences of young Drew and then the dreamlike sequences of smashed glass and, you know, the remnants of atrocity. So that was all interesting to bring to life. And then the costume, you know, the costume was a huge part of it. Timmy White was our brilliant designer, and it was really trying to work out like, what would Drew Lord Haig today be wearing if he's running a successful IT business in England. Like, how does he look? And there's just little flares of him, nice little red socks, and he wanted to wear his good brogues and his shirt that his kids had bought him from M&S, but it's a pretty cool black shirt, you know, and it was trying to like really break down that character, which, and Wendy really helped with that. You know, I was kind of conjuring up a mood board and checking with Wendy. She's like, yeah, I think he'd wear a bit of this or a bit of that. And that was amazing to bring him to life. And then of course then all of our men themselves, because we didn't want to explicitly say it was this group or another. So it was, you know, it was this kind of omnipresent group of paramilitaries from the north, you know, with a few flashes of flags to hone it in a bit tighter. And then just little things, I don't know, like the centenary balloons, and you know, it was just the touches, just little touches. And that's what Robbie was then able to bring to life so beautifully by just zooming in on these touches, these subtle moments that you'd either blink and you'd miss it, you know, otherwise. So
yeah, no, it's absolutely, like, especially with, I think the touches are important for creating the atmosphere, right? Because all this like build up to the final reveal that just completely changes. Like, you already have this foreboding sense of anticipation of what's going to happen, but when it happens, it just hits so much harder.
good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. So yeah, the atmosphere was really impactful. And I think that kind of like, it definitely, like, all these elements coming together really worked.
Well, I think also what's interesting with it, and it's been interesting now in the few like screenings we've had, like with audiences and stuff, sometimes people are roaring with